Welcome back to our second to last Art Hero DIY mystery ornament. This is going to require several colors. You can pause at any time to see some different materials I'm using and colors. We've got all different types of paintbrushes, Posca markers, and I had to shout out this incredible artist who creates these. I got these for my birthday. Thank you so much, Tamra, for sending me these. I love them. We're going to start first with a heather gray, kind of a bluish gray, going to pale aqua and mixing in an ice green. Now, if you don't have these colors, it's okay. I'm just kind of blending it all so it's not just one dark color. And I'm adding a little bit of acrylic white. This is the only acrylic paint I'm using. Everything else is a Holman acrylic wash. As I blend all of it together, it's going to create a soft gray color. Now, you'll see the change as we go, but at this point, I'm adding shadows where I think they would go. We want to start with our darkest tones on the bottom and work our way up. In this case, we're using white for the majority of the character, so we want to have several colors to really help that white pop. But white doesn't stand out without a shadow underneath, so I just kind of keep blending, and I go a little darker for under her chin, on her chest, and under her arm, and that's because the shadow is mostly cast on those parts. I also use it closer to the base of the head where the ears meet, and also on the bottom of the right ear. So you'll see me just kind of adding as we go. A lot of this video is going to get sped up because it really is how much you want to add or take away. And just like a sculptor, you can always add paint, take paint away, use different brushes to add different types of textures. And you know, I'm all about a good texture. We're going to get a lot of shadow cast under the mouth, under the eyelashes, and under the chin. That way it looks a little more 3D, as if there's little bumps on her face, or if something is sticking out from her face, we're seeing more of a shadow. Now I'm just gently cleaning off my brushes. I use mostly dry brushing, and that just means less water to paint ratio. So I go back and I use the same brush, but now I'm gonna get a little bit lighter. You don't wanna just jump from a dark gray to a medium gray to a white. You want to kind of blend your colors, or as I'm calling it, marrying them so that they can just gently change the gradient just a little bit. I'm working on this as it's drying, so every time I add my new layer, it kind of reactivates what's already down and kind of blends it together nicely. It's gonna look really white on the screen, but this definitely had a very, very, very soft gray to it, so I'm not using pure white. When you see me start to use white, you'll know the difference. You'll definitely see it. So I'm going to speed things up here and show you guys that all I'm doing is kind of blending this gray into the dark gray. We don't want that dark gray to stay as dark as it is, so you can kind of see it's reactivating and picking up those colors and blending in. Now I'm adding the bows here just so I can kind of see where would a shadow cast if the light was coming from the top. And that's where you want to cast your little shadows. So right under the bow is where you can add a little bit more of the gray tones. We are going to add some more blues into this. I think that using things outside of a gray, a black, or a white, if possible, is the best way to go. It also will give a lot of interest to the piece if we're using other types of colors for shadows. Now we're moving into a darker burgundy, and we're going to add some different tones to lighten the bow up as we go. So let's start with our shadows here in the creases of the bow, where the fold for the center of the bow is, underneath the bow. Again, think about light hitting from the top of the bow. Also note where I put a low light on the side of the bow where the strap would go around the neck. Now we're going to do the same thing to the smaller bow, and this one you can use any size brush. I'm just using one of my like pouncer brushes just to get some coverage really fast. And now I'm taking a red, a really soft pink, almost a bright pink. The colors you choose to make your bows could be any color you want. So I'm just using this as a reference to the original character. I didn't go very pastel. I kind of still kept it a very warm tone of pink, almost on a reddish rose color. So now you can either tap or you can slide your brush across. It kind of depends on, is it a satin? Is it a fabric that has texture? What is the look you're going for? So I kind of at the end up smoothing mine out more, but this just kind of got the color to start to sit and gave it a little bit of a rough texture. Now I'm gonna let this play out. You'll start to see how I add more and more highlights to this using lighter pinks. Instead of going straight to white and pink to mix a brighter color, I kind of stick to the same family of colors and I mix that bright pink into the reddish color, and then that way the two of them marry nicely, and I start to blend again just from the top because we're going light at the top to dark towards the bottom where the shadows cast. I'm going to let this play out. It always helps to watch the video first and then go back and attempt how to do this, but if you understand it, go right on ahead. All right, so now I'm just going back with my darker burgundy color and going in reverse. I'm putting back some of the shadows now, just so it starts to look a little bit more 3D. And as I do that, I also add one last highlight. So this is where I said you're gonna start to see more of a satin look, as if the bow is really smooth as opposed to textured. And I don't go all the way to the inside of the bow when I'm on each of the little bow ears. Instead, I stay further out to the edge, and that way it just naturally has that nice shadow and look like it's folding right at the center. Now using the edge of my brush, this is a deerfoot brush, I am just adding a little bit of the crease look to it, and I'm feathering it out as I go. Again, not a lot of water on my brush. If there's anything you need to touch up, yours will look different than mine, so just add to this as you see fit, and everybody's will kind of unfold as you keep adding or taking away. Now I'm repeating all of this on the smaller bow, and instead of using a bigger brush to do all my shadows, I've switched to a thin line brush and I'm just following it along. A little bit of water might actually help with your line brush. It doesn't always disperse the paint like the larger brushes do or the pouncer brushes, so you want to get that nice flow going. And then just to make it less harsh, I'm adding a little bit more of that brighter pink into it and then just fading it out. Now I go back to do some highlights, and this is not overkill. You just want to add the highlights in certain spots just to add a little bit of reflection of that light hitting right at the top. Now technically the band that goes around her neck would actually be shadow because it's under her neck. I'm just going to go ahead and add those highlights even though the band would be covered under her fur. This is where I remind people that all different paintbrushes in your kit are important and will save you a lot of work. And using your materials for good is not cheating. It is just making things so much easier. I know I used to cut little strips out of my paintbrushes and it never worked really good. So here I'm using basically like a fur brush. It's all split brush, and I'm taking my aqua blue, some white, and a little bit of that ice green. I've avoided that really dark gray that you can see right above my hand there on the palette. I'm avoiding that now, and we're just sticking more with a pale aqua. The reason we went to this is to brighten it up a bit where the shadows are, and when we add our white, that blue will still dry a little bit darker, and now you can see those highlights starting to pop over it. That's what we were trying to get in that effect. And now I'm showing you that your brush can also go any way when you lay it down. You can put it on its side for a thin line, or you can lay it flat to create more of a brushed fur look. So it's really how much you mess around with your brushes and try different things. Experiment with the brushes when you're painting so that you know what it can do. Once you learn all the different ways you can utilize your brush, Then every time you go to paint, you're gonna feel much more confident. And here under the arm, I'm avoiding right at the line. I wanna kind of make sure my dry brush barely has any paint on it. I'm gonna paint her arm mostly white, but remember, right at the bottom of her arm, there is gonna be a bit of shadow. So you wanna be really thoughtful about where the light does hit when it comes down from the top. Try not to overdo it. Sometimes we do overkill and we can't picture what's going to happen at the end when it's done, but the more you step back and let things dry, the better it's going to be as you're completing your piece. In between each of these, I was working on another project, so I would step away as the camera cuts away and let it kind of dry. So now we can see that those textures are starting to really show. It's starting to dry. The shadows are looking much more soft. They're not looking as harsh. You can see that dark gray on my palette next to me is no longer the color you see on the wood. So you just want to make sure you're really thoughtful about taking your time and not rushing the project, not assuming that you won't like it at the end. You can always go back with paint and fix things up. I'm taking a dark burgundy to start inside of my ears, and then I'm just going to keep adding a lighter tone as I go. I'll come back to the ears later once they're dry, but for now I just mixed a little bit of a light pink into the burgundy and going to let that dry. I will be switching over to a little fine line brush, and I'm going to start adding much more fine details for shadow with this line brush. So I add the creases to her little triangle eyelids, to the base of where technically eyeliner would go, but she's just a kitten. She doesn't need any makeup. And then even to the top of her nose to show the bridge of her nose, and under the lips, under the chin, and that extra little chin that I gave her for the fluffiness of her fur. Taking my fine line brush and adding some white highlights, really making sure everything is dry now. I made sure all of my shadows are dry. I want to go back with a highlight over her nose, but under that blue line we gave for her shadow, I'm adding a little highlight to the tops of the chin lines that we made, to the tops of her eyelids, and just adding a little highlight here and there. And then I go back with my pale aqua, which is that sky blue kind of tone, and adding a little bit more shadow. When her lash lines go down with black, it's going to make everything come together, I promise you. I'm just taking another larger fur brush, something that creates like that fur texture, and I was just blending everything out and really trying to get everything set, because now we're gonna start the blush. I'm using a coral red, almost like a salmon, mixing it with a little bit of white, and your choice, you can go with a small kind of pouncer brush or a larger mop brush, and I went with the mop brush. I'm going in and creating some little lips at the bottom of the smile. I'm going to paint the nose that deep burgundy color. And since I have it on my brush, I usually utilize any paint that's already loaded on the brush. And instead of adding more highlights, I'm going back and adding a curved low light to the corners of the ears, where there would be a bit of a shadow coming in. If you'd like to do this, you can. It's a lot of flip-flopping between highlights, highlights, lowlights. There's no rules like once your low light has already gone down and you've covered it with brighter colors that you can't go back. You can do whatever you need to do to get the final look you're going for. Now I'm just kind of mixing in some other colors to that coral red that I used for her cheeks. And look, I'm making it kind of match the color of her cheeks as well. And because those ears are super dry, I'm staying right in the center and just adding that pop of color inside. I take a tiny bit of white, the littlest bit of white, and I kind of brush upward to create a little bit of a fur look inside of her ear as well. If you don't like what I've chosen, you can do what you want. This is your Aristocat. Some of the colors went onto the ear, so I'm just using my fine line brush and touching up some areas that just need a little bit more of white for the cleanup. I'm taking a little bit of that salmon. It's kind of hard to see with the lighting, but a little bit of salmon mixed with burgundy. Instead of just going straight from burgundy to a bright pink, I mixed it in, and now I'm using that line brush and following the lines on the ornament and creating that cute little smile that she has. Now, I didn't use black, and you are welcome to use black to go with the traditional look of the cartoon, but I really like it to look as soft as possible and only use black for things like the lash line, which you see here. It helps to turn your canvas and pull towards you or away from you, so make sure you get yourself in a comfortable position. I'm barely touching the brush down, so as I end with a little flick, and as I'm pulling inward, I make sure I can press down where it's thicker and then release. Now we're gonna move into some polka dots. This was a choice I made. I knew I was gonna cover it in glitter. So to make that glitter really pop, I wanted to make sure I added some little dots just to create that pop of color of white. And now I'm just going back and adding some highlights around the edges, so that way we can separate the center of the bow and the edges from the other pieces. And when I add little stars, I use a fine point brush. It has to be really fine, perfect point at the end of the brush. I make a dot in the center and then I flick outward as I go. Flicking upward and downward is great, but it really does help to flick from the center upward. So always feel free to turn your canvas so you can achieve that. This has taken me many years to even learn as good as I am, and I'm still not that great. So practice, practice, practice makes perfect. I do the same thing with my little tiny bow, and I get it to the color and the design that I like. And again, I knew I was going to cover these in glitter, so I go back and add some more highlights with the brighter pink. This time I did mix some acrylic white with that really bright kind of fluorescent pink I was using. It's called just pink, but it does look like it's a fluorescent. And now I think I'm ready for some tacky glue. This is Aleene's tacky glue. I'm applying with my little Pouncer Deerfoot brush. And as I do this, I'm going to add the glitter as soon as possible because the tacky glue is meant to dry very fast. Once I tap it off, I also use my fingers to kind of really get off that extra glitter that might be stuck on there. And once I get it to my liking, I move it off to the side. And now we're ready to glue our pieces. Oh wait, no we're not. Let's talk iridescence. So I love iridescent glitters, iridescent powders. These powders can be dangerous, so I highly suggest moving very slowly. It just takes the tiniest bit of water to activate this. Now, sometimes it might look a little bit brown or green when you're done applying something that's like a purple iridescent. It's just the different angles you're holding it. For the most part, it will be the main color you want it to look. So now we're just taking some white, putting some white through the eyelids to add like a little shine through that and a little highlight on the nose. I'm just kind of chiseling away and adding different things as I go. And once I think it's complete, I'm going to use my fast drying Gorilla Glue. This is a super glue that dries in about 10 seconds if you just let it sit. Don't pick up your ornament. Let it dry how you want it. Don't rush it. It's pretty fast, but just in case, don't rush it. And I add my little bow to the top. This is where my Posca markers come in. I grab this beautiful burgundy tone, kind of a nice fuchsia, and I'm just adding some low lights and shadows back to some areas that maybe my brush didn't do it good enough, or this can add a little bit more to it. And I really want to make sure that divider is there for that last little bow ear touching the little neck strap. And now I'm adding some bright pink that I have a Posca markers because all paint looks different. It all depends on the colors you're using, and that could just add another tone of pink to it. But isn't she beautiful? Thank you so much, you guys, for waiting for this DIY ornament during a time that I've been extremely busy with family and celebrating my birthday month. Thank you for your support and stay classy.